Earthlings, welcome.
Hello and welcome. And
So-
we've lost Nella from in the last 10 seconds.
we lost Nella. And Wendy's been complaining that she looks like Donald Trump.
Oh my God. I'm really sorry about the lighting and how orange I look. Please do not think I'm related to the T word. It's just my light. If I turn it off, you get that. So it's quite, but it's just a bit of an orange glow. So yeah, apologies.
We'll live. We'll live with it.
We will live.
So they used to say in the kind of variety shows that we've got a very packed program, but we have actually. So this is like a team show, and we've been picking out bits and pieces of news and things for us to chat about and just generally kind of bounce a few ideas around today. So it will mean that we'll need you even more to chat away in the comments. There's no charge for that. We don't do super chats and everything. It's still only going out to my YouTube channel. So all the, I think Meta and StreamYard must have had a fight or something, because it seems like they just won't talk to each other now. It's really weird. So,
that is strange, isn't it? So because you used to go out on Facebook, didn't you? And then now you can't. No, it's just not working.
You used to go on 2 Facebooks and then YouTube. Yeah. And the ironic thing, right, is that StreamYard now let you go on 10 different. We can stream it to 10 different places. But we've lost Nella again.
Oh, we've lost Nella again.
Yeah, we might have some technical issues with Nella, because she's actually at the animal clinic because they've had some kind of emergency, or it sounds like she's been called in. So we'll have to expect her to be dropping in and out, I think. So
okay, sorry about that. Something happened. I don't know what.
Speak of the devil, we just talked about you there now.
She just vanishes and then just suddenly appears again.
It did.
It's like magic show. Okay. I like Roger Philip's comment. Mango Mussolini. I like that, Philip.
Mango Mussolini. Yeah.
Mango Mussolini.
You see all that stuff from Miller. I mean, they're really going for the left, trying to demonize the left.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me that within a year, vegan outreach is going to be classified as terrorism or something. I mean, they are getting so, they're going right down the Mussolini path, actually, the well-known Mussolini path. So,
but on the other hand, we had the news about the European Court of Human Rights recognizing anti-speciesism as belief and protecting veganism.
Yeah.
Which happened 3-4 days ago.
And wasn't that the one also including recognizing our fellow animals as sentient beings, or is that a separate thing?
I think it's a separate thing.
Yeah, although that recognition of sentientism doesn't seem to have mattered in any big way so far, does it? In terms of oppressing our fellow animals. It seems like, we know this and we recognize it, and we even put it into the law, but we don't really do much about it.
We get the top comments on this show, folks.
Oh well, I hope you look at me and think of a mango and not not the Oompa Loompa in the bloody White House. Anyway,
any type of fruit. So this is just a wee advert, really, because we've not really had time to. I've kind of scanned Reddit, which is a bit of a travesty, really. So this is Jori Kazmajana, and he's just put this out about 5 days ago. It's a very long article, as you can see. It's one of those that there's a quote there from Ronnie. You see Ronnie there? It's one of those where you're really going to need to read it more than once to really get it. So it's very in depth, and it's pretty interesting stuff, and lots and lots of. I mean, you could spend the rest of your life chasing around on all the hyperlinks, really. But we just thought we would advertise that. So it's 5 developmental stages of veganism from Geordie there.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to read that yet, but definitely looking forward to that. And maybe we can discuss it properly when we've all had time to digest it.
We have all the time to read it and reread it.
We've done our duty. So okay, so we've got a few very short videos to show you and a couple of other things, and also I had an interesting exchange at the outreach last Saturday, which was interesting. I suppose, in fact, I could talk about that now. This guy came up, and I think his name is either Richard or Ben. I thought it was Ben. I think Linda thought it was Richard, but
similar names.
Yeah,
similar names.
It's a name anyway. And he started off really weird because he says that he said if I was going to do anything because he was a flesh consumer, I'd have to go vegan because vegetarianism is morally inconsistent. That's what he started with, which was quite an interesting way to begin.
Refreshing.
Yeah.
Yes,
I know,
especially for a non-vegan.
Yeah. I know, yeah. And so he said, and the reason for that is that I used to. So again, we're not quite sure we've got this detail right, but he said I either worked on a dairy farm for a while or I lived on one. I don't know whether it might have been a lodger or something like that. And he said, you know what the worst thing is? The worst thing is the day when they removed the calves, you know. And so I said, and did the mother cows call out for their calves? And he said, no, they were screaming.
Oh.
And I said, so how long? He said, all night. And he said the phrase again, they were screaming all night. And it kind of upset him and all that. Not enough for him to do much about it, but it was obviously a memory that stuck with him, you know, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because I said on Facebook the other day, it reminded me of about 5-6 years ago. I did I was doing some outreach in a famous part of Dublin. I think we might have even been doing the Cube. I'd gone to have a look at a Cube. So it might have been more than 5 years ago. And there was 3 dairy farmers, and they all said that. Well, one in particular said that the part that is difficult is when the cows are lowing. So she used that term, lowing, which again is calling out, you know. So I said to this guy, well, what you could do, you can guarantee for a start that wherever the calves were, they'll be calling for their mums as well, you know. And he didn't know. He had no idea what had happened to the calves. So that would indicate that it was probably a lodger rather than a worker. Although, again, you know, it is a weird thing. I mentioned this in because the second part of my May Contain Vegans interviews came out a couple of days ago. And I mentioned there that it's quite interesting how ignorant farmers are of, you know, the slaughterhouse process. And whenever one comes up and starts talking to us, I get them to describe the slaughterhouse process, and they either won't, and I think more often they can't. They don't know it. You know.
And you know what's also quite still surprising, I think, to a lot of vegans is how ignorant non-vegans and the wider public are about the fact that mother cows have to be made pregnant and give birth in order to produce milk, and then that milk is taken for humans, so the calves are obviously, you know, surplus to requirements and all that. It's like even, you know, very intelligent adult people who are or educated, you know, whatever, any walk of life, doesn't matter, that there's so much ignorance around it. that people are so surprised. Like when you have outreach conversations and you talk about that, they're just like, oh. And how many people just from that socialization from being children have this belief that somehow cows just magically produce milk, and that it's in their interest for us to take it in some way. They eat grass, they produce milk to give to us, and it's like so deeply ingrained.
It's almost like brainwashing. I mean, you get the same story, the same narrative in books, children's plays, children's songs all the time. So.
Yeah.
Those Welsh farmers who came up about a month ago now, they were saying that cows don't need to be pregnant to lactate. And I said, well, I do know that lactation can be induced in other ways, but you talk about minute amounts of milk. If you do that, it's a little bit like, you know, a human. What do they call one woman who feeds someone else's child?
They call it well, they used to call them a nurse, didn't they? Like a nurse back in the most Shakespearean times, and because Juliet was brought up by her nurse, wasn't she? And I think that meant she had actually breastfed her. I don't know if there's another term. There might be. Yeah,
somebody in the comments are about to know. Is it wet nurse?
Wet nurse. That's wet it. Nurse. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wet nurses. And yeah, and so I said, well, you know, again, for the wet nurse to you know, create enough milk, they have to go through a pregnancy as well, and then they end up feeding, you know, both children, as it were. But if they would just induce it in another way, they probably wouldn't produce enough. I mean, and obviously for a commercial dairy industry, there's no way that they could produce enough. But they again they seem to be conning themselves on purpose, you know, that kind of weird thing. So that leads us actually nicely to the first clip. So it's very short. I might have to play it twice, but I saw this on TikTok, I think it was, and it was when LBC, which is that's a radio station, your neck of the woods, isn't it, Wendy? LBC, London.
Yeah. Yeah, what's the BC stuff? Do you know what, my brain's gone really blank.
Broadcasting company, something like that, maybe?
Yeah, something like that. But it's definitely a London one anyway.
Yeah, but I think it does kind of transmit globally.
But it probably does, yeah, because I think it's part of the biggest conversation. Isn't it London's biggest conversation or something like that?
Yeah, that's right. That's a little slogan they've got in the background.
Slogan.
So have a look at the, I mean, whether the interviewer was pretending to be ignorant, I don't know, just for the sake of asking a question. But also, I thought that the comments made by the vegan were very refreshing. So let's play that, and I might, like I say, do that twice.
Possibly be fun.
Do you like beans on toast?
I do.
Do you like chips?
That didn't start.
How can vegan food possibly be fun?
Do you like beans on toast?
I do.
Do you like chips?
I love chips.
There we go. We're already halfway there. I think there's a fun side, and then also
Are you going to tell me they're vegan? That's vegan food.
Yeah. What do you mean? Of course. What animal do you think's in those?
And just to clarify, it began as London Broadcasting Company, and now they class it as Leading Britain's Conversation, LBC.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
interesting one.
There because he said, "Are you going to tell me that those things are vegan food?" I was talking about chips or fries, and talking about what was the first one?
Beans on toast.
Beans on toast, yeah, that's right. And so
you cannot beat a bit of beans on toast.
But I thought it was quite refreshing because the vegan didn't immediately go for, you know, like the vegan friendly meats and stuff. So I thought that was quite good. You know, the fact that they chose kind of everyday kind of foods, which was quite refreshing, I thought, which is pretty good. So let me just play that again so we get it.
How can vegan food possibly be fun?
Do you like beans on toast?
I do.
Do you like chips?
I love chips.
There we go. We're already halfway there. I think there's a fun side, and then also
Are you going to tell me they're vegan? That's vegan food.
Yeah. What do you mean? Of course. What animal do you think's in those?
Do you think it's a genuine question?
Yes,
Seems
I
to
think
be.
I think it is a genuine question. People tend to ignore the plant-based foods they eat every day, even the local cuisine, people foods that have been eaten since their childhoods. And when they think about vegan food, they either think about something very processed, a meat substitute, for example, or they think about something tasteless, like lettuce with nothing on it. I think it's a genuine question. People do not realize how many plant-based foods they eat daily.
No, I think that's
I,
definitely true, because they don't want to, because when they say that catch-all, oh, what about the crop deaths for your vegan food? They're almost like suggesting that there is a category of food which they don't have anything to do with, and so they totally ignore the staples, the fruit and veg and rice or etc. Right?
And I was wondering, because funnily enough, Nelly, you literally, it's like you're reading my notes here, because you made all the points I was like, and I was wondering whether that people think of the products, and like you said, none of the substitute for flesh and all of that, whether it's to do with the kind of success of marketing vegan products. Like, people now think of vegan because they see vegan on products in the supermarket and things like that, and think, oh no, that's not for me. Like, I had a client who literally sent me a message one day and said, oh, I've bought this cheese by mistake, Wendy, and it's vegan cheese, so obviously we're not going to eat it. Would you like it? And I said, but you could eat it, because it's suitable for everyone. Oh no,
it's food. It's not toxic waste.
So quite kindly gave me the cheese, but it was just struck me the mentality of, that's not for me, that's your food. So there is definitely a kind of division there, I think, in people's minds. And just to point out, though, sometimes beans on toast might not be vegan friendly, depending on what you might have put on the toast. Yes. The spread or the butter kind of thing, if it's not a vegan friendly butter. And also chips may be fried in fats that are not vegan friendly. So yeah, you just have to take have a little bit of awareness of that, obviously, for anyone who's new to veganism.
Do you think because there's a couple of comments in the chat, do you think it might have been better if she'd have answered, well, first of all, veganism is a philosophy, but since you've asked me about food, and then do that, because that seems, because I mean, obviously, if they're going to ask you about that, I mean, the other option is to say, well, vegan, why are you asking me about food? Veganism is a philosophy, right? And so I wondered whether. Sorry.
I think one could do it the other way around. I mean, answer the way she answered, making the other person, since they asked about food, realize that they already eat vegan food, and then but anyways, vegan is not a diet; it's a philosophy, and first get to answer the question, and then say whatever they wanted to say.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good example of meeting the person where they're at. And then obviously, if we'd have heard the rest of that conversation, in an ideal world, to bring that person along the journey with you and explain, like you just said, about, what veganism actually is.
Because I would, for example, say that there is a lot of vegan food around, like stuff we eat every day. But even if I cannot find something in a restaurant or in a city or in a place I visit for vacation or whatever, I would make the extra effort, because veganism is not a diet, it's a philosophy, it's an ideology, and blah, blah, blah. That's how I would answer.
Well, okay. I following that bit of film on the same link. Actually, there's the Trump thing, but I'll leave that for now. So this is probably going to be the heaviest thing we're going to talk about today. So maybe we should do that now. Remove, and then add. Okay, so it's concerning to me lately that, yeah, Jennifer's saying that your mic is breaking up a bit there, Nella. It was a little bit, but
yeah, it was a
yeah,
little bit.
I boosted the,
It was just a little bit in and out, like
phasing, yeah.
I like, just while we're waiting for Nella as well, I liked Jennifer's comment actually. Before I was vegan, I used to think veganism was a spiritual ritual. I thought I would have to live on a mountain and meditate every day to be vegan. Although I quite like the sound of that, Jennifer, to be fair. I quite like the sound of that. But yeah, it's funny what the preconceptions we have, isn't it, about things that we don't understand.
Discrimination against people without easy access to mountains. That's me.
Nella's gone again.
Yeah, I know it's gone again. So, as I was saying then, that it's been a bit of a concern to me that there's quite a lot of people, they're kind of arguing about the definition of veganism, and in particular, Leslie Cross's involvement in that. Let's bring it back in. Do you want to say something now? Let's see if we can test your mic.
Nella, can you hear us? Just say something so we can see if we can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you. I'm trying to fix the microphone thing.
That sounds better now, though.
Yeah, there's a bit better.
Okay.
Yeah,
sounds a bit better.
That's great.
And so poor old Leslie Cross, who I suppose you could say 2 years ago was like almost virtually forgotten figure in the movement. Like nobody was talking about Cross when we started looking into Cross's work. Now he's being used as a bit of a political football, and it's really quite upsetting to me, because Leslie Cross's work is very important in the history of the evolution of the philosophy, you know. And now what's happening is, I've noticed in videos and YouTube, Instagram, that as soon as somebody mentions Leslie Cross, there's loads of people just piling in with laughter emojis and stuff. So it's a bit sad. And I think part of it is the fact that there is a group of people who will extract one sentence from Leslie Cross and say that is veganism. Now, I've always regarded that as unfair and also inaccurate. The only way really that Leslie Cross can be read is in full, because he wasn't totally consistent. Somebody pointed out the other day he wasn't a professional philosopher, which was true, but he was a professional journalist, so he wrote pretty well, but he didn't necessarily write consistently. And so there are kind of like 2 or 3 definitions of veganism from Cross himself. So this is the kind of lead up to all that, right? So this is the year, which is 49, when Cross points out to the rest of the movement that we don't have a definition of veganism. He said it's not been a problem. In fact, it's probably been a benefit to us so far, but we need to sort it out. And so that's what they started to do. And he did a little bit of a lit review, and he pointed out this top one, which is, my favorite. It's not a definition, but it was a statement that Donald Watson made. The 4th issue of the Vegan News. Everything else is the vegan, except where it's noted. Stated, the object of the Vegan Society is to oppose the exploitation of sentient life, whether it's profitable to do so or not. And then the bit in brackets is Leslie Cross's comment. This is a considerable widening of the original non-dairy motivation. So this is bringing us back to a really interesting part of the history. I won't go into this in great detail, but it's that thing where they approached the Vegetarian Society because they were known at the time as non-dairy vegetarians, and they wanted a non-dairy section, and the vegetarians said no, and that and that was a real boom for veganism, because without if they said yes, we might not really have had vegan philosophy as we know it, which is interesting thing. And I'm not going to read out that bottom bit, but basically he's saying that the Vegan Society was formed in a constitutional sense in 1947. So it took them a long time to find their feet, really. You know, there's a lot going on. But then what you find is the idea of veganism grows and grows. So non-dairy vegetarian was left behind very quickly, right? And then it says the stated aim refers only to diet commodities and the spreading of vegan teaching. They do not mention other aims which might equally be regarded as being vegan. Such aims, for example, as opposition to hunting, vivisection for farming animals, and the castration and enslavement of animals for transport and other work. So that you know, the fairly kind of radical statements you get in here. And then when we move to 51, this is where the real work of the definition comes in. And so this one here, In Search of Veganism, and also Veganism Defined, these are the ones which often get suggested as being the core of veganism, and I kind of would agree with that. It's the focus of veganism. So essentially, what we've got here is the focus of veganism, but not the scope. And so veganism may therefore be defined as the principle of the emancipation of the animals from exploitation by man, obviously using the language at the time. The object of the society shall be to end the exploitation of animals by man, and, this is in Vegan Defined 51, the word vegan shall mean the doctrine that man should live without exploiting animals. So that one in particular is the one that is used quite a lot within this argument that's going on. Now, this is the new constitution. This is quite interesting. The object of the vegan movement to end the exploitation of animals by man is clarified as to the meaning of exploitation by Rule 4A, which pledges the society to, quote, seek to end the use of animals by man for food, commodities, work, hunting, vivisection, and all other uses involving exploitation of animal life by man. So the thing that he pointed out as lacking, as it were, in 49 is now incorporated into it in 51. By the adoption of this rule, the society has clearly come out on the side of the liberators. It's not so much welfare that we seek as freedom. So that's 51. When we get to
just to say, you know, that on that last slide, Roger,
yeah,
that quote there, that if you go back, I don't know if you can go back one. Can you go back one? The other one,
that one,
previous one. No, the one after that.
the one before that, or after it.
Oh no, maybe you did go back. No, the one, I think the one after this. Is that the one you were on?
Yeah,
oh yes, sorry, you had a
51,
sorry.
yeah.
In that very last sentence as well, where it says by the adoption of this rule, the society has clearly come out on the side of the liberators. I think, is there not, or is this a different piece of writing that he actually says has clearly come onto the side? It is not so much welfare we seek, or is it after this where he talks about the change of relationship from the relationship between human and animals is one of master and slave? Is that usually with
right,
this bit here?
And he also says something very similar to this again twice.
Okay,
and,
maybe it's the other one, because I know there's one where, and I really liked that what he said, because he made it very clear about the relationship that we have with other animals, and it's master and slave and that domination, because because that doesn't get spoken about often in all of these definitions, but I really quite like that as well.
Yeah. Now the interesting thing about it is with that master and slave quote, he also says something which at first seems counterintuitive. He says, in any master and slave relationship, it's the master who suffers the most. Right? And you think, And what I think he was saying is that they suffer moral damage by being a slave master. That's what I think he's getting at there.
Yeah,
so
almost a spiritual harm in a way.
Yeah,
to that
well,
person's.
Cross spoke about spirituality quite a lot. Well, he didn't actually say spirituality, but he talked on a spiritual level, you know, in many different ways. So this is my favorite bit, which is the surge of freedom. So this is what I regard as the final essay on vegan philosophy. Now, in terms of the argument that I started with, this essay is virtually totally overlooked. And the reason for it is because it doesn't say what the people who support Cross want it to say. And he says the word veganism is a symbol that stands for a major change, a new mutation comparable with the freeing of the serfs and the freeing of the slaves. You might recognize that from the talk that I gave at NARM a couple of years ago, Wendy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says the official definition, and so this is really important, this part. The doctrine that man should live without exploitation is accurate, precise, and comprehensive, but not always fully understood. And then he clarifies that. This is not surprising, as it might seem, for rarely have 9 short words enshrined a reform so massive, the achievement of which will bring a new world and new men to inhabit it. So this is the moral evolution of humanity part. Veganism is not a mere side shoot in human evolution, but a central extending growth of considerable significance. So, you know, kind of Cross was kind of developing all the time. This one really, I suppose, the 54 one, is the quintessential statement of vegan philosophy as far as Cross is concerned. There is another thing from 55, but that's actually just a transcript from a talk that he gave to a vegetarian conference, I think it was. So as I said, it's really quite interesting. And of course, he now says, is essentially saying that the short definition, which he said all social movements need, is really talking about the focus of veganism, but not veganism as a whole. So if you think of veganism as focus and scope, or he said 2 broad aspects. He said that veganism has 2 broad aspects. So the first thing, the doctrine that man should live without exploitation, that's the first broad aspect. The second broad aspect of veganism, he said, Cross said, is about the benefits to humanity, which he said will be absolutely massive. Like he says here, that vegan values will bring about a new world with new men, new humans to inhabit it. Now, Cross said that in 54. Kathleen Janaway said that in 92 as well. They all said the same thing, that the spread of vegan values would mean human liberation and the liberation of our fellow animals. And even with Janaway, she said it would end human poverty and human starvation, this kind of stuff. And she also said it should end human warfare. So, you know, vegan values, because she actually said at the end of that speech, veganism is as important as that. And then finally, and this is the bit where we get into really strange areas. Now, we're up to 1974. There's been a heck of a lot of changes at this point. Once you get into the 60s, I was looking at the winter 1965 vegan when they were celebrating 21 years. The coming of age, it kept saying, and all that, and there's lots of tributes coming in. But there were some changes coming in. It was getting more welfare-y. They were starting to work with Beauty Without Cruelty. And then they went on to work with groups like Compassionate Wool Farming. So the kind of strident stuff you got from Cross had already started to be damaged by the 60s. So this is the 70s. And he's talking about his family. We gave up dairy products at a difficult time in 1942 during World War II. Veganism, and this is the bit that nobody ever wants to talk about, which to me means and always will mean the philosophy that man should, for his own advancement, live without exploiting animals. And then this other bit, which is even weirder for me, is merely an adjustment slipping you into a slightly more advantageous orbit. So I think this is quite problematic from Cross. It's quite an interesting thing. But the point, he's never said this before, that veganism will mean the philosophy that man should, for his own advancement. But they all said that in one way or another, although not as strident as this, but they all said that. They all said that veganism would result in human liberation. And Cross said, Watson said the vegan movement was the only movement that could save humanity, and they all said these huge kind of ideas that what veganism was all about, which was the liberation of all. It was justice for all, but with a focus. I don't know if we get lots of comments here, but with a focus on our fellow animals. That bit, the focus of veganism, that's not in any doubt, right? But
do you think, just on this actually, because this is quite an interesting comment, and I often think about it in these terms as well, from the vegan anthem, such is only possible through the one principle, and this is not about humans, just like feminism is not about men. Because obviously in the feminist movement, you've obviously got the men's rights and all that kind of pushback, and feminists would say, feminism is not about men. However, patriarchy harms men, as much as it harms women, just in very different ways. And so for feminist principles to be successful, or the dismantling of patriarchy, men will also benefit from feminism, and that everyone should be a pro-feminist kind of thing. Do you think that's a similar thing to what?
I think it's the same. It's almost
the same thing.
I think. Well, I mean, you tell me whether this kind of rings true. It's as though the feminists are saying the focus of feminism is on women's liberation, but the wider thing is to bring down patriarchy, which hurts everyone, right? And so they often will say that feminism will aid men, but that's not the focus.
But that's not the focus. And you would, and it wouldn't be, let's put men first and see what's going to really help them. It's like, no, it's by helping women and girls, we're naturally going to help men, because the world will just be a better place. And it sounds very similar, doesn't it, to if people adopt and live their life by vegan principles, humans are naturally just going to be better people, and the world will, of course, be a better functioning world with all of those principles. And I think that's what it seems to be saying, isn't it? It's not that we're saying veganism is about humans at all. It's
in the same way with feminism, it recognizes the entanglements of oppression, as feminists recognizes racism or classism, and where all these oppressions meet. The same can be said about veganism. So I think it's a fair comparison.
Yeah, it seems to be. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
See, I don't agree with this, because first of all, I don't think the phraseology, if you lump humans in, that's not what they did. They didn't lump humans in to an animal movement. They had a holistic view about justice and liberation, which incorporated the moral evolution of humanity, right? You promote speciesism, but the real problem is the people fighting speciesism are humans. Our movement is full of humans, because our fellow animals, sadly we might think, don't organize themselves into a social movement. And so in that sense, we are the liberators, right? They don't liberate themselves. And so I don't think the phrase lump humans in helps us at all, really, because that's not what they're getting at. We're just going to throw another issue into the animal movement. They saw it in much more holistic way than that, that there's going to be benefit to all and that is written time and time and time and time again, not least by Leslie Cross himself, which is why in this big argument that's going on, this extraction of one single sentence is totally wrong. And it's dishonest, it's deceitful, it doesn't get us anywhere. Because the only way you can read Leslie Cross is by reading it in full and in context. And some of it is a bit contradictory, but then they were still finding their feet. You know, even in the 1960s, they were still saying that they were finding their feet. On their 21st birthday, they were still saying that they're finding their feet. But it took a bad turn in the end, because Leslie Cross kind of gets relegated, even in that special edition, winter I think it was 65. So Leslie Cross kind of gets relegated, you know, to always somebody who was pretty useful at the beginning, because he wrote a little letter saying, well, actually, I was the one who started it, so you know, don't kind of bracket me off, kind of thing.
And Deb says here, along the lines. Oh,
sorry, did I take yours off? Didn't I?
Yeah, it's all right. That's all right, Doug. As along the lines of what Tolstoy is attributed as saying, as long as there are slaughterhouses, there will be battlefields, and it's yeah.
Yeah, but that's got nothing to do with lumping humans in.
That was from Deb, that one. Oh, sorry, I'll put that one back on. Yeah, so again, it's kind of, as vegans, if we advocate for vegan principles and values, that's how we are bettering the world, not by saying in the vegan movement, we must all put our focus on fighting for human rights. What I think we're saying is, we can't embody vegan values if we don't understand human rights and how all oppression is entangled. That's different, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think the really crucial thing to say is, if anybody tries to challenge the focus of veganism, then it's no longer vegan.
Yeah. Veganism is the emancipation, as you said, of animals
that's the core focus of veganism.
Yeah.
And always has been. And I don't see anybody trying, you know, because you get a lot of comments about, oh, you're trying to lump humans in, you're trying to take, you know, the animals out of their own movement. This kind of, none of that is true. It's just being able to differentiate between the focus and scope. Or again, in Cross's own language, this is not made up, this is what he wrote, the broad aspects of veganism. You know, it's all there. It's all there in the essays. And I think the real problem is exactly why one sentence has been extracted from about 6 or 7 essays, is because other parts of Cross don't say what they want it to say.
I think it works the other way as well. For me, I think it's not that people take that sentence and that's the only one they know, so that's what they base their practice on. I think it's people know what they believe and look for the thing that fits it. So it's like that, you know, reinforcing your own bias kind of thing. What's the word? Confirmation bias. I think it's a little bit of that as well. People know how they feel. They feel that humans are the oppressors. They feel that humans are the ones doing the wrong to our fellow animals. And therefore, why are we even considering humans? And therefore, they see that sentence and cherry pick that because that fits what they feel in their core, in a way. And I think there's I think then we're talking past each other, because there's then this lack of understanding that we're not saying the same things. What people are arguing against, lumping humans in, is actually not what was being said in the first place. But I think that's how it's been read when we give the pushback of, no, this is not what Leslie Cross said, this is what veganism was meant to be. It's like we're trying to push human rights and human issues into the movement. And I think there's a massive talking over each other and talking through each other. I think the common ground is we all agree that fellow animals are the absolute focus and the driving force of veganism, the same as feminism is for women and girls. Like no doubt in my mind about that whatsoever. However, I would not want to step on other people's movements or issues in order to try to push, you know, veganism in terms of we have to kind of, that doesn't mean I don't, you know, I prioritize veganism. I'm not saying I'm push it down. What I mean is I wouldn't want to create other oppressions whilst trying to liberate fellow animals. We have to consider everything together, because wherever there's one oppression, it will feed another. They work together, they feed each other, compound each other. The same as, you know, there's a lot of critical feminist theory now and ecofeminist theory about how speciesism and feminism are actually so interlinked. Like you can literally almost not pull them apart. They've grown together. They've kind of, their foundations have got the same history, the same connections, and they've grown together. They feed each other. You read Carol Adams' work, Patrice Jones' work, Marty Kuehl's work, all these great feminist thinkers, and you can see it. It's clear as day that it's that speciesism is a feminist issue as well. So that there's that real overlap and that connection there as well.
Okay. Right.
Tumbleweeds flying through the air.
So all we can say now, I think we know what's coming, folks, is and now for something completely different.
Change your diet, dude. Being vegan is good shit.
Oh,
Your tummy's happy, your digestion's a dream. Fiber's your friend, so you'll love those moments in the loop. Being vegan is good shit. It makes your booty dance and sing. It's a speedy affair, no time to spare. Being vegan is good shit. Do you feel the relief? You'll be more punctual than a freakishly precise Japanese train. Good shit. We vegans feel so good. Our guts feel good. Okay. Your booty's rocking on YouTube. Being vegan is good shit. Hi, happy caller. Yes, I'm happy. Being vegan is good shit.
It's probably the first time we've featured a something by Peter. So that wasn't my idea, folks. So whose idea was that?
Not guilty, Governor.
It's got to be Never then. No,
Yeah, she's not here to defend herself.
Now, yeah.
I think she was posting it as a bit of a "can you believe this" shit space, literally.
Yeah, well, on the serious side, of course, it's yet another thing where you're getting, you know, big focus on diet again, you know, and it's as though really there's it's as though the big groups can't help it. I mean, we already know in historical terms that they were resistant to bringing the philosophy of veganism in, but they were much happier to talk about veganism as a diet. And some of them, that was the only way they would talk about veganism. And I don't really think there's much of a change. In fact, you could almost say that things are kind of going backwards a little bit at the moment, you know, in terms of what's going on. You know, that's why I've you know, I've come up with this idea of division of labor.
I suppose, like, playing devil's advocate, okay, we could say, you know, they're trying to reach people through humor and, you know, but they are obviously bringing, you know, health benefits, I suppose. You know, we're going back to, like, are we highlighting benefits to humans through the movement? And I guess they're trying to do that through, look at what you can get. You can feel so much healthier. Obviously, it's focusing on the dietary aspects, which I have real mixed feelings about that, because one, I feel like it's all everyone really thinks about and talks about, and we want to kind of move away from that and talk about the relationship that we have with our fellow animals, in, you know, and changing that relationship from one of domination and control and subservience, and actually shifting that to respect and justice and fairness and all of that stuff. So the diet thing gets in the way a little bit of that, and yet on the other hand, it's the biggest obstacle that people often have in their minds about starting to live vegan, because that's the relationship that they're most familiar with in their life on a daily basis, is who they are consuming every day. So that's a real block and a real obstacle for people. And so to not deal with the dietary aspects, I think, is difficult. So we have to deal with it in some way. But this, I do believe that this almost, for me, it kind of like makes a little bit of a mockery of a social justice movement. Can you imagine, you know, Black Lives Matter doing some kind of video like this, or, you know, radical feminists? I don't know, maybe in history there have been humorous attempts to get people to end the transatlantic slave trade. Who knows? I don't know enough about all the details of that to know, but it just feels like, if we're a social justice movement, do we want to put out funny pictures about poo, funny cartoons about poo? I just don't know. It doesn't sit right with me, to be honest. But.
Yeah, well, yeah, I feel the same. I mean, obviously, it's, I mean, I suppose if you're going to do it at all, you'd have to blend. You have to blend the message, you know, and talk about, you know, what, you know, the core of veganism. You know, otherwise you're asking for trouble almost. You know, we've got Nella back, I think.
I'm back, but
she's like a little jack in a box.
I'm having technical problems, so I'm muting myself so you don't have to listen to my cracking. About the video, we get all these deluded, irrelevant, you know, interpretations of veganism, and I think that adding more to the existing situation is making things worse. I mean, advertising veganism as something that can be beneficial for someone's gut. Yeah, it's definitely not the way to go, and it's so disappointing seeing organizations, even those we don't believe in, but that they are supposedly, you know, advocating for animal rights, using this kind of messages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your mic seems to be working good again now, I think.
Thankfully, I don't know why. Nothing changed.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, presumably, the question could be, how long have you adhered to the philosophy of veganism, isn't it?
I tend to say live vegan now rather than be vegan.
Yeah.
I often will say I live vegan, because it's like it's a choice and it's my behavior and my philosophy rather than I am. You know, I don't know, something I became, or I became vegan. It's like I don't say, oh, I became a feminist. It's like, I don't know. It's difficult to know exactly what the best thing is, but I don't say go vegan anyway. Like, oh, go feminist, go vegan, go anti-racist, go anti-ableist. You know, you just start to learn about it and adhere to the philosophy more, don't you? I suppose. But then you would say I am a feminist. So
yes. Yeah. And it's part of our identities. So,
yeah, it's a tricky one, that. But I think the thing is, people do automatically just hear vegan and think diet, and I think you shared a video, Roger, with an interview with someone saying that we should ditch veganism altogether because it's so tainted as well now.
That's right. Yes.
But I was going to ask you, in
India.
In India, yeah. Just
in
that regard, I was just going to ask both of you and people in the chat as well what you think about if if there's this kind of difference, people are saying, well, I don't believe veganism should be this, whatever it is, like thinking about human issues or whatever, as an entanglement, as the scope. And people will say, oh, well, actually, veganism is this. I want it to be this way, and we should ditch veganism because it's tainted. Would you be happy for people to advocate for something that started off maybe for them as veganism, but actually they've evolved it into what they feel it should be? Would you be happy for them to do that, as long as they don't call it veganism, so that veganism stays as, well, this is what veganism was and this is what it should be going forward? Or do you think that's too divisive, and therefore do we keep veganism too small? How much should it be able to evolve and still be veganism? What have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's to quote Tom Reagan, that's a difficult question. I mean,
Yeah.
that is
Like a politician, Roger.
Yeah, my recent interview, I said it's almost like veganism as a movement needs to kind of get smaller before it can get larger again, in the sense that, because labels are absolutely, like we always talk about how important language is in social movements, but labels are also important in social movements, and we throw labels around really in a kind of messy, cavalier way in this movement, and it doesn't help, because we're not kind of telling the truth. And so, in fact, I mean, that was I mean, part of the comment could be this. Let me just show you this. It's only about 30 seconds, I think.
We should change being vegan to being kind to animals, because that's what we are. It's being kind to animals, not hurting animals. And who wants to do that? Nobody does. We love our dogs. Most people love their dogs, and they just don't see the difference. And as soon as your eyes are open to that, you can never see it another way.
Okay, just make sure we get the beginning of that.
Really, we should change being vegan to being kind to animals, because that's what we are.
So yeah, I don't understand why there's a push to change what veganism is.
And also, it's not kindness. I mean, it's limiting what veganism is a lot. Of course, it involves kindness, but it's not about kindness. It's about justice. It's about liberation. So it makes vegans small.
Yeah, and also then you get this whole comparison again with everyone loves their dogs. Actually, if dogs are coming from breeders and they're being bred for companionship for humans, then that's not veganism either. That's not emancipation. That's still a category chosen by humans for human gain, human desires. So it's not veganism in that way.
No.
And kindness is very abstract. I mean, you hear kindness and 10 people have 10 different interpretations of kindness. What's kindness? For someone, kindness is, I don't know, sedating a cow before killing them. Yeah,
very kind. And there's even that expression, isn't there? You've got to be cruel to be kind. Some people feel that it's good in the long run. If you're a little bit cruel, in the end, you're bringing some kind of benefit. So yeah, it's very subjective. I think that's the trouble with it. The same as cruelty, the same as suffering, like necessary suffering. I think yours and mine and the chatter's ideas of necessary suffering would be completely different to most non-vegans out there.
Well, the pioneers of the movement were very worried about this. I mean, there's one bit where Watson said a little jokey line saying, we can't have people being strict between meals. And basically they were trying to work out a few things, whether you could have a full membership of the Vegan Society and whether you could have an associate membership. And I suppose we'd see that as allyship nowadays, that kind of thing. But it seems to me that the real problem, and it echoes what happened with animal rights and animal welfare, is that people want a label which doesn't fit them, but also they want a label that they don't agree with. And I've never understood that. I kind of slightly understand it. I was told, for example, years ago, well, even though my language might be welfareist and all that, I don't want to be associated with the RSPCA. Somebody in England talking to me, and so there is that, and then there's other complications where some vegans said that, well, vegans or animal rights people had to do animal welfare because animal welfares were bad at it, right? And so there's kind of layers and layers of things, and so they didn't want to call themselves animal welfare, even though they wanted to engage with animal welfare, and even though they wanted to use the language of animal welfare, and that was always a problem. Now you've got a repeat where you've got people. I mean, obviously Leonard is the classic example, that they want to call something not veganism, you know, by being reducitarian about it. They want to reduce it to a diet, but then most of the national groups do that, and then they want to then talk about flexible veganism and all that, veganish and all the rest. I don't mind veganish too much, because at least it's not saying vegan. Some people will say it's too close. It's a too close label to vegan, but at least it's not vegan. You know, and so if people, I don't know whether it's a question of people won't be honest about their own position, or it could be that they're a bit confused about their own position. And I think the thing that Francione fought against for years, the kind of conflation of animal welfare and animal rights, I think that's back. I think most vegans now in the movement, or most people in the, you know, what we call the animal rights movement, they think that, well, why can't we do both? Yeah, and even we should do both.
What I don't understand about, I had a thought in my head and I think it's disappeared like a puff of smoke. It was there and then it just went. It was something to do with Leonard, something what you said there. Oh yeah, no, that was it. What I don't understand about people who want to say, look, we need to make, like, water veganism down to make it more palatable so that more people join us. But it's like, well, then more people are not joining veganism, are they? They're joining something else. So what does that actually achieve anyway? Because you're saying, let's make the group bigger, let's make veganism bigger. It's like, but that's not veganism. So actually you're not making veganism bigger, you're making something different bigger, reducitarianism, vegetarianism, pesca, whatever it is. You're making that bigger. So the only way to make veganism bigger is for more people to live vegan, not to water it down and pretend there's kind of living vegan apart from cheese and all that shite. Am I allowed to say that?
That's reducing it to a diet anyway. But I mean, it's true. I think we've got, I mean, I think money comes into it here, because there is no longer a circuit of vegetarian organized conferences. Now, on the face of it, the vegan strategist is a vegetarian or a pescatarian. That's his position. He's always talking about eating the products derived from our fellow animals. He seems to have something about eating fishes all the time. And so his position, even in a dietary sense, is not vegan. Okay. But we shouldn't talk about the vegan diet. You know, I think sometimes maybe that was a mistake. Maybe we should have always just talked about vegan friendly.
Vegan friendly, yeah.
Yeah. And I like that. I remember going to a conference once. It was in Dublin, and there was somebody there who was arguing vociferously against the differentiation between plant-based and vegan. I think it's a really useful one, because I think that most people are probably plant-based, and they're the ones who think that they're vegan because of their diet. Yeah. So they kind of need to be educated that veganism is first and foremost a philosophy with the focus on our fellow animals. And that's what it is. It's not kindness. I mean, Viva's got a new slogan: "Vegan is a state of kind." It's not. That's another reducitarian idea. Now, why there are so many people who seem hell bent on redefining and therefore reducing veganism from what, you know, Cross and a couple of others, but mainly Cross, set out. But you know, the real tragedy of the history of our movement is that it didn't take long, once Cross stopped writing, for the people in the Vegan Society to do it. You know, Cross's radicalism was kicked out pretty quick. You could almost say that we talk about Cross all day, but Cross is kind of 10 years in the movement maximum. Everything else is much more diet orientated, welfare orientated, and stuff like that.
Deb says, what do you think is the motivation behind these folks who are vegan-ish instead of declaring themselves as vegan? It's almost like goes back to, I think, in what that guy was saying in India, that it's become tainted. And it's almost like sometimes veganism is a bit of a swear word. And there's a lot of pushback to veganism, and vegans get a lot of trolling. And there's research that shows they're a very unpopular group, etc. And it could be almost not wanting to associate with that, but yet still wanting to change the world for the better for fellow animals, but just wanting to distance themselves from that label. And also, I think it's to make it more palatable to people they're trying to bring into the movement. Because if it's distasteful to be vegan, how am I going to grow the movement? How am I going to get you to come and join, you know, the cause, if you feel like vegans are, if you're going to be hated and if you're going to be trolled and if you're just going to be seen as, you know, something, you know, murky. I don't know. Then let's just distance ourselves from that and make the movement bigger and make it palatable. And yeah, so he talks about, doesn't he, membership to the group. We make the membership rules too difficult. We need to like slacken up the rules in order to let people in.
It's kind of like make the entrance fee less.
Yeah.
Same goes about feminism too. I mean, how often do you hear women say, no, I'm not a feminist? And then you have to question them and explain, are you pro your rights? Are you pro other women's rights? And you say, yes, of course, but I'm not a feminist. So, but no one is suggesting that we should change feminist name. I think we need to push against that. I mean,
it's like anything that is fighting for justice has become like a tainted word, like woke. Started off, I think, as quite a positive word, and now it's become much like a slur. If you're woke and wokeism and feminism and, you know, veganism, anything that's kind of trying to progress justice for others in some way seems to be like, oh God, the do-gooders, you know, that they call it actually do-gooder derogation, don't they? There's a lot of research on that, do-gooder derogation. People just don't particularly want to know about people doing good things.
That's been around for years though, hasn't it? You know, the label do-gooder. Because I always remember when I was fairly new to the movement, somebody called me a do-gooder, and I said, what's the alternative? A do-badder? Well, I mean, what are you talking about? You know? I mean, it's such a weird phrase when you think about it. Going back to veganish, the only person I know who used that label is Leonard himself, and he had a T-shirt made up and everything. I just wonder though whether we'd welcome all the people who are now all over Instagram and TikTok saying, oh, you know, I eat vegan except for, you know, X, Y, and Z, or just I eat vegan. None of that really is veganism. If they did embrace the veganish label, and it would kind of require them, I suppose, to say, well, actually, I'm not vegan. In the same way, and this is a credit to him, the same way that Peter Singer, not being animal rights, he kept saying that he wasn't, and he would make it clear that he wasn't. and he did that repeatedly. I'm not an animal rights advocate, right? But it still didn't seem to stop the movement calling him that. He was almost like saying to the movement, in particular to Ingrid Newkirk, I'm not an animal rights advocate, so don't call my book Animal Rights Philosophy, which is what Peter did for years and years.
And he even gets called the godfather of animal rights, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Very patriarchal, paternalistic
that's right,
attitude.
Yeah. Well, there was that thing about the paternity struggle between people like Ryder, people like Andrew Lindsay, people like Tom Reagan, people like, all those kind of people. But again, I mean, apart from, again, to his credit, I suppose, Ryder would cite Bridget Brophy a lot and say, that's where it began. That was the first, we're talking about 1965 again. It's ironic, isn't it? Because as we're saying here, that 65 is where it starts going sour for veganism in a way. The only comment about this, though, is that the earlier pioneers, including Cross, they would use the word cruelty. No words were banned for them, but their main word was exploitation. But they would use the word cruelty. And so, Eva Batt was pretty terrible at it, even though she put out one of the best kind of quotes about veganism. And so, and if you go back to see the Open Door thing, 76 Open Door.
On the BBC, yeah,
there's lots of mention of cruelty in that.
Well, I think in a way there's the reason there's in the animal rights movement now this pushback to cruelty is we know again because it's very subjective and it means that people focus on we often talk about like kicking dogs or doing something extremely violent, which of course is absolutely abhorrent. So this is where sometimes I think people will say, well, surely you oppose cruelty, and it's like, well, of course. It's not that we don't want to acknowledge or recognize that there is like abominable cruelty to our fellow animals, but that's not the fundamental wrong. That wrong emanates out of the fundamental use and oppression, isn't it?
Because Reagan gave us that line, which is a perfect way of talking about, if somebody wants to talk to you about cruelty, say, well, I'll talk to you about that, but do understand that veganism is a philosophy and that cruelty is not the fundamental wrong when it comes to our exploitation of our fellow animals, right?
Yeah.
When Nella comes back, we'll have to check on time because I know she was.
Yeah, she's got to go, isn't she?
Yeah.
And that's it, isn't it? So I think that's why now there's a reticence from the likes of us to use the word cruelty because that's such a big focus in the speciesist welfareism movement, if we call it that, who believe that we need to end the worst practices of harm or suffering and all of that, but without ending the actual use, the fundamental wrong. So I think the goal is very different. And I think because we don't want to repeat the language of those advocating for continuation of use, we tend to pull away from that. Doesn't mean we're not against it. And that's, I think, where, and I think, again, it's like you say, isn't it, no words are banned. We can talk about it and we can say it as long as we explain.
Yeah, although I think that now we've got a historical sweep of many years now, it would actually do the movement a favor, I think, if we were able to get a consensus that we call a moratorium on using words like cruelty and abuse, because there are such a concentration of that in the movement now, and it would be good to kind of banish it in aid of trying to create that differentiation that we seem to need in order to recover the vision of veganism we need to go backwards before we can go forwards, right? And it seems to me then that the tactical thing to do, if you want to call it tactics or whatever, would be just to eliminate from our vocabulary cruelty language, and see that for a good 10 years as well. That's our SPCA language. That's welfare stuff. It's not us. As Cross said, we're not so much welfare as liberation. Although he said we're not so much welfare as liberation.
Yeah.
So even then, it's not that strident.
And it does make me think about something else that we were looking at, which is from Carnism Debunked, and that whole talk about we need to address the symptoms. We need to address the cruelty and the suffering, and all of that, because without, I think they said something like, without the symptoms, the disease, there is no disease, or the disease is meaningless.
The C word, wasn't it? Saying that if the C word didn't mean anything, it wouldn't matter whether you got it or not.
Oh, C word, you mean cancer?
Yeah, but he wasn't a strong point. In fact, I think today or yesterday, maybe today, someone has answered that and responded to it with.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
But I think it's quite interesting, because I think in a way, and I think this is where a lot of strategy is based in outreach, is that campaigns focus on what the majority of public see as the cruel things, that the real violence and the kicking and the hitting and the hearing the fellow animals screaming and the things like that, because they will automatically recognize that that's something abhorrent to them, and they see that, and emotionally they connect to that. And I think that's obviously where that strategy lies, isn't it, in showing like graphic footage or slaughterhouse footage and all of that, rather than showing a fellow animal who seems to be living their best life, because you emotively you connect into that. And I think there is a point to that, in that if people see there's nothing wrong, how do you draw them in? How do you connect and say, no, there's something wrong with this, but what is it? I can't see there's anything wrong. They seem quite happy. And I think that's where there's a real sticky topic, isn't it?
I know what you're saying, because even Reagan, when he put out Empty Cages, which is, I suppose, his most welfarist book. I suppose it's his weakest book, I suppose. And I think that the reason for that is he'd given up on the movement by then, and he just decided to try and do a bit of animal rights within an animal welfare movement. And I think he'd come to terms with that. I think it's the same as Singer. He came to terms with the fact that no matter how many times he said he's not animal rights, the animal rights movement is going to call him that. So I think both of those philosophers kind of came to terms with the limitations of our movement, that we weren't good at differentiation, which they found important. And I also think that they were able to just say, well, maybe it's an academic distinction without a difference, really. That they were doing that. And so even when he was doing his talks, which were related to Empty Cages, I don't know whether you saw it. It started off with that thing about the restaurant and the cat, very graphic thing. I don't know whether you recognize what I'm saying. Yeah. Whereas the case for animal rights doesn't require that you show people footage of cruelty. It's making the case that sentient beings are rights bearers.
I think if you look at that, if you look at the case for animal rights by Tom Reagan, which is obviously, the foundational text for animal rights philosophy, compared to Peter Singer's Animal Liberation, people find Animal Liberation much more accessible than Tom Reagan's book. And I think it's more accessible. But he does get very graphic in that, doesn't he? There's a lot of depiction of violations and all of that stuff, and maybe that's, and whereas Tom Reagan's book is very follows the logic, the philosophy. Is very, I suppose it's very text heavy, very idea heavy. So maybe there's something in that, in a way.
There's no pictures in the case.
Yeah, you should have animated. You should have got some little cartoons of people having nice poo. Shouldn't he? Then it would, you know. But I suppose it's going back to, like, you know, just going back to that idea of, should we deal with the symptoms? It's like without the symptoms, the disease is meaningless. But in a way, I'm trying to, I don't know, formulate a thought. I suppose it's like with, say, going back to feminism again, you can fight, you know, you can have campaigns against domestic abuse, for example, which is obviously a form of cruelty to women, or, you know, but it's also a violation of their inherent right to be, you know, not to have their body violated, not to be, to have justice and not to be disrespected in that way, to have equality. And yet you can kind of campaign against that, against domestic violence, as part of feminism, I suppose. And feminism is about blowing apart patriarchy, or radical feminism is anyway, probably more so than choice feminism, which seems to be a modern version of women just get to choose whatever they want, and that's feminism. Radical feminism is much more structural and systemic, and changing patriarchal norms and paradigms and ideas of women being subservient or not having equality and all of that. So I guess you can still fight against cruel practices towards girls and women, even though that's not the actual full feminist, you know, goals, if that makes sense. So it's kind of, I kind of go back and forward with this, and the symptoms. I think people obviously do need to understand the symptoms sometimes before they realize, or maybe that's, you know, bringing them in. Like, why do we care? But also, as animal rightists, we are, you know, opposing breeding, captivity, use, and murder, killing. They are very solid things we're fighting with. It's not just an airy fairy idea. You know, we're opposed to all of those things, and to respecting other animals' inherent bodily autonomy. That's a very solid thing.
I think it's something to do with getting in front of the issue rather than be behind it. Then Nella's just she can't get a connection back.
No, I've noticed that she can't get back.
Kind of animal rights and gaining respect for the rights of our fellow animals, that will prevent cruelty.
Yeah.
Whereas the animal welfare thing is kind of following on, because that's the way it actually works. Somebody is cruel to someone, and then, you know, there's a kind of remedy, or there's some reform to try and mitigate it, so it doesn't happen again. What animal rights does is get in front of the problem and say, if we all think this way, there wouldn't be a problem to clean up. So that would be
or if there is, then at least you're starting from a baseline of, like, we all acknowledge that our fellow animals need to be respected and treated with you know, fairness, and they should have their own agency and all of that. If we have that baseline, then other things that are happening, you can go, okay, we all acknowledge this, so therefore we're going to fight this cruelty that's happening. At the moment, we haven't even got that acknowledgement of that baseline, have we? That's the difference, I think, with, like, human issues and fellow animal issues, is humans at least have got that recognition of some fundamental human rights, whereas fellow animals have got none of that. There's no baseline to start from. So we're trying to legislate against atrocities when, you know, there's nowhere to go. They're just considered property, commodities.
Isn't it? You know, with the way that humans will treat other humans, whether is all the talk of human rights lip service, or is it real? You know, I that's always worried me for quite a few years. Roisin is asking this question. I thought it was Deborah. It's Roisin. understand what you're saying. So it begs the question: do you think incrementalism will lead to abolition? So that's the idea of new welfare.
I think that's Deb asking Washeen something. Debbie's asking Washeen.
Right, and
Washeen asked a question or made a comment, and then.
Oh, so it's not a question even for us then.
It's for Washeen. Yeah, I think Washeen made. Okay, so this is the question, I believe. It is so nuanced, but if we were to think strategically, as in getting people to open their minds to veganism, shouldn't we be building up all organisations addressing animal liberation and welfare? And then that was then Deb's question, that the one you put up in response to that, I believe.
Yeah.
And actually, I think I shared with you earlier, and we probably haven't got time to talk about it now, but there was the Substack from the Phoenix Project, which talks very much about this. It's called, I can just find it.
Yeah, I've got it right here. If you want me to.
Oh, have you? So maybe we can. I can't find it. Oh, there it is. Could some reforms be strengthening the animal factory system? And it basically talks about this, and basically, because it's quite a long article, so we won't pick it apart now or anything, but it's just basically talking about, well, not all welfareism or not all calls for welfare reforms are equal. Some reforms will be basically.
It's there on the screen. So some weaken it.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
Leave it unchanged. Others unintentionally
strengthen it. Yeah, and I suppose it's about when you're creating campaigns or having conversations or whatever you're doing. It's about being aware of those things. And I think can you scroll down a little bit on that, Roger? I don't know. I can't even really see it, but
where do you want to
go? Towards the bottom where they give you the questions to ask, I think. The strategic test.
Uh-huh.
I can't really read it. I don't know if you can see that small writing, but I can't really.
I might be able to zoom in, actually.
Right, so the strategic test. 4 questions can help answer whether a reform, campaign, or a demand is strategic and likely to weaken the animal factory system or unintentionally strengthen it. 1, scale. Does it reduce how many animals are bred, used, and killed? I like the language. Does it stop expansion or keep animals out of the system entirely? 2, legitimacy. Does it expose the violence and injustice inherent in the system? Does it make the industry harder to defend in public? 3, story. Does it frame animals, I prefer fellow animals or other animals, but trapped in the system as complex individuals, denied dignity and freedom? Does it encourage the public to ask, should this be happening and how can we move beyond it? And 4, movement power. Does it build organized pressure that outlasts the campaign and strengthens the movement's ability to act again? So I found that quite interesting, that article, because I've been kind of thinking along kind of similar lines myself, in that what will I get involved in and what won't I, and why? What's my criteria? And I always feel like, if it furthers some form of abolition or ending something where our fellow animals are used, I might well get involved. Like, for example, even a single issue campaign, I might think, well, this is actually to oppose the end of something. I can advocate for that.
The thing, though, Wendy, is animal factory system. I mean, why yet again we've got the factory farming,
the factory
stress thing, right? And so, I mean, why not just talk about the animal farming system? You could do that, because what they said to me as a whole, to be honest, was that because of those 3 possibilities, well, it might weaken it, it might not do anything, it might unintentionally strengthen it. So these are kind of like risks that you take. It's almost like these are the odds, and you go into your campaign and it might do all of those 3 things. So, but if you just concentrate on veganism, we know what that's going to do. And so it seems to me that you know, the vegan option rather than these kind of things just cuts through it and just go, well, okay, well, you're totally uncertain about outcomes. You know, obviously, if someone begins to live vegan, that in itself is an outcome. I always think we're not good at celebrating that as a victory in a movement that needs victories, have a psychological need for a victory. The one thing that we've never done is seen the growth of ethical vegans, to use that phrase, as a victory in itself. And Nick Pendergrast talked about this in his PhD, because he references the VIP, you know, Vegan Information Project, and he says that, you know, that I was saying we could see, you know, someone adopting the philosophy of veganism as a victory rather than a closed down sign on a fur farm. But we never seem to do it that way. And I think it's because it's more invisible. You know, you can see a sign on the fur farm,
Mm-hmm.
you can see the legislation. Whereas, you know, we're back to Reagan and revolving door. You know, we're always not sure to what extent the vegan movement is growing. You know, is it the plant-based movement that's growing and the vegan movement is not really? I fear that could be true.
Well, it doesn't help that in a lot of surveys that they actually conflate veganism and vegetarianism often in the category when as a defining, you know, as an identity.
Both as a diet.
As a diet, yeah, exactly. So it doesn't. See, then you don't get that distinction at all in a way. But we need different categories. We need the vegan as a philosophy, stroke plant-based diet follower, rather than and then vegetarian, whatever, you know, just it needs to be different. It needs to be completely different. I do wonder that. I just wonder what's the equivalent, say like for the feminist movement, going out as a radical feminist, going out doing feminist outreach. I wonder if we would have anything like that, because often we're fighting feminism through different campaigns and trying to gain legal traction or workplace progress, or, you know, ending violence against girls and women and all of this stuff. There are many different campaigns and ways that things are being fought, and yet we don't have like feminist outreach in the same way that we have like vegan outreach. So then and that's what in a way makes me still think that other campaigns still might be useful if they are pushing for an end. But obviously it's the framing that's important as well. Like, why are we trying to end this? Not just because it's cruel, it's because we are violating the inherent rights of these individuals and violating their bodies and that kind of thing. But also because I think it could be used both ways. Like, we can use vegan outreach to lead into like understanding the whole bigger picture, but can we also use other campaigns as a doorway towards veganism? Like, so we're kind of both, but we have to frame other things correctly to kind of, you know, explain the bigger picture. Why is it wrong, and not because it's just cruel. And I think that's the difficulty as well. Like, because things aren't.
Back to what you've just said about feminism, isn't it true that second wave feminism, they did have anti-sexist campaigns, didn't they? Critiquing sexism.
Sexism, yeah.
Oh.
I'm just trying to imagine outreaches in the street showing like footage of like women being beaten up or something, and then going, come and talk to me about feminism. It's quite interesting though, isn't it, to think of it?
That would be a weird thing to see, wouldn't it?
It would. Very, you know, very weird.
The weird thing is, you know, like domestic violence, for example, is a fairly hidden, latent thing. You know, the police still don't like to get that involved with domestic violence issues because it's difficult for them to enter into a family house and then start throwing their weight around, as it were. And obviously, you know, that's kind of not an anarchist solution whatsoever anyway. But Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Whether you know, say there was an anti-sexist campaign launched, which relied on footage. There was like an anti-sexist AV.
Yeah.
How weird would that be? At the same time, you're going to get people going, I've never seen that before. You know, I didn't know that. You know, I mean, there would be a lot of parallels.
There would, and then you get the parallel of showing the reality of something, and then people going, oh, but that's not, most people aren't like that though. That's just a few bad apples. You'd still get that as well, wouldn't you? And it's actually what, and in a way, you're talking about the same thing. It's not just these men; it's society that creates the ability and for this to happen, or creates the foundations for this to be something that arises. In the same way that, you know, the kicking of the pigs isn't just about that person kicking the pig. It's about, well, of course, that is really important, but it's about a society that creates the, you know, the environment for that to happen, the structures, the systems, the mindset, the ideologies for that to happen. And it's the same thing, isn't it? We're trying to, it's like in my speech that I gave recently at the memorial, I was talking about, rather than cutting off we're just cutting off branches of a toxic tree, but we have to uproot speciesism. We can't just keep chopping off and doing little reforms here and there, because the tree just will come back. We have to uproot it, like kill the roots of speciesism, in the same way we've got to kill the roots of patriarchal norms for sexism and misogyny and other isms. The same.
This issue always fascinates me, because this is true, but not true, because it's a little bit like we as a movement have allowed this to happen. You know, we as a movement embraced this non-rights position and this non-vegan position. And the weird thing is whether you point out that in Animal Liberation he says that he can't really see a moral issue with free-range egg production, and again in the Melanie Joy book, you can procure eggs and dairy without violence. If you bring those issues up, all these people who've got the book and have been to the talks, they kind of react with horror, as though it's the first time they've heard that. It's not as though they're hiding their position. Their position is in plain sight, but it's not a vegan position. And yet we've kind of, I was going to say pedestaled. Is that a word? We've put them on a pedestal, but we didn't have to.
Yeah. And again, that's a hierarchical, patriarchal thing, isn't it? We do put people on pedestals, often men, and then worship at their feet, which is kind of what happened with the singer, isn't it?
I don't know who that's aimed at. Me, probably.
No, I don't think so.
Right. So, well, sadly, we've lost Nella, but then she did say that she'd have to go after an hour, and we've gone well over our time.
We have, haven't we?
Yeah. In fact, there's a couple of things we haven't
did
done.
A little chat.
There's a video we haven't shown, but we don't need to show that. And there's that Viva survey, but we don't need to do that either, I don't think. So, should we do a wrap, as they say in media land?
Unless anyone's got any burning questions in the chat.
Well, there's been a lively conversation, so lively that it's hard to keep up with it, actually.
Yeah, no, and my eyesight's not like I can't see it properly too well. So yeah, sorry if we've missed some good comments in there.
Is this something to do with what did you say, contacts?
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Just lately, my eyes are not that great. Even with my contacts in and my glasses on, I'm constantly taking them off. For lenses in, can't see there, can't see far. Just got a certain distance so I can see all right, and then the close up isn't that great at the moment. So yeah, I have to get that sorted.
I've kind of had that because I got some varifocals, and I can't really say I'm a great fan. Although I got varifocals on a pair of sunglasses, and they work pretty okay. It's the clear ones that, you know, it makes me feel a bit dizzy. I'm a little bit dizzy on my feet, you know. I'm not
yeah. Because you've got that change.
The perspective seems to be moving around all the time. So these are like reading
now.
glasses. Sorry? Yeah.
Just kidding. No burning questions. Face hater.
Well, we're just going around in circles with this one. Don't accept that. You know, the writings of Cross in particular was much more nuanced than this. And I don't understand why there's so much resistance to it. Presumably because it doesn't say what they wanted to say. And so, I mean, I even heard that apart from this one sentence, somebody actually suggested that everything else has been made up by somebody else. Now, that's obviously a ludicrous thing to say. You know, all the essays are there, but you know, they need to be carefully read, and they're not terribly consistent, as we've just seen from the extracts that we looked at today. But they're there or thereabouts, you know, so it's pretty cohesive. But there's no doubt about it that they did talk about a focus in the scope. I don't see why we can't have a focus in the scope with every movement. So we've talked about what makes sense as a focus and scope in the feminist movement. You know, we know what makes sense in our movement. And so therefore you've got that freedom to focus on where you want to go. You're not lumping anything in. Do
you think if we take care of the focus, the scope takes care of itself in a way? Or does it not? Is it not quite as simple as that?
Not if you're deliberately denying that there is such a thing. You know, but I mean, obviously, it would be equally wrong to focus on the scope, because that would be kind of silly. You know, in a sense, no movement does that. Every movement focuses on its focus. Logic, right? But that doesn't mean there's not a wider scope to the same movements. And the scope is not a danger. You see, the point is, the idea is that scope is a danger to the focus. Now, I don't see that, because the focus has always been the focus, and I don't see any serious threat to it. In fact, more of a threat is the watering down of veganism. You know, the reducitarian push. You know, I mean, Leonard is a bigger threat to people who want to talk about that there's a scope to veganism.
I think a lot of the pushback to the scope, and we're talking about human issues here, just to clarify if anyone is just tuned in and I didn't catch the rest of the conversation, but I think a lot of that pushback is when within the movement, advocates, activists are expected to, or this is said, I don't know how true it is, but are expected to put human issues first, or prioritize, or push fellow animals issues aside in order to prioritize the human issue first. And I think that's sometimes where that pushback comes, but I don't know how much that actually happens, and because I don't know the examples that they're talking about. Really.
See, again, we're just repeating ourselves here, but there isn't one principle. There's one principle to the focus, but there isn't one principle to veganism, which is exactly why Leslie Cross used the phrase, he wrote this down himself, I'm not making it up, the second broad aspect of veganism. So there's no one principle. There's also a second broad aspect, or I call that the scope. And they're not a problem. That's what I don't understand. It's not a problem. What's a problem is you've got people saying, well, if you eat fishes or a cookie with eggs in, then that's veganism as far as I think. That's a problem, right? The fact that there's a focus and scope to veganism, that's not a problem. That's a benefit, if anything. You know,
I think when we talk about these things, I think it's more useful if we actually could start to talk more about the practical application of it, because just thinking about like with ecofeminism, and we're talking about a change of relationship, and something I read recently, I can't remember who it was actually, was saying like you can't be an eco-feminist theorist. It's all about practice. Like you have the theory, but you can't just be that. It's all about practice and the actions and the behavior and everything, because everything's in context of a relationship, and every body is in the context of their environment, the life they live, whatever, like, you know. And I think sometimes if we talked about, rather than just talking in ideas, I think it would be helpful if we actually, especially when you're having these conversations with other people who don't agree, is can we bring a practical application in to that discussion and discuss it as an actual situation? So it's not just an idea that floats about and we go, oh, this is focus, this is scope. I don't think this is a problem. Well, I think it is. Well, what is it about it that's a problem? And we could like get into the granular actual issue, because often I think when people bring these problems, I don't know if they really exist. It's just the idea exists, but is there an actual situation where it's becoming a problem? And there we can go, right, okay, in this situation, this is what I think vegans ought to think about and do, with the focus of our fellow animals in mind. And then, do you know what I mean? So we don't just talk in theory all the time.
Sometimes I do think there's a bit of a manufactured problem that's not really there, I think. I mean, I agree with Vegan Anthem here. He says that means cross, that the principle informs the rest. Now, I totally agree with that. But he clarifies that without this, veganism would become anti-vegan. Well, yeah, but it's not without that. It's not without that beginning or the core or the focus. I mean, we might just be arguing about words.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. Wouldn't it be better to actually, for people to bring along the actual real life situation so we can talk about it in a context rather than just a floating idea, and go, right, in this situation, vegans were asked to do this in terms of humans and putting humans first, and therefore what should we do in this situation? Let's talk about that in real terms, in a real situation, because that's more interesting in a way, because that's how we live. We're living vegan. We're not just being a vegan in our heads. Like, how do we put our values into practice in a daily situation every day? Because, all of us here will have these situations where every day caring for the crew here, Deb's here, I know she's got crew here that she looks after. Every day you're faced with these dilemmas and these situations, or even walking into the garden when you've got a situation, or driving my car. I've got webs on my car at the minute, and I'm like, I don't want to, this car is filthy, I can't wash it, because I don't want to destroy these webs for these individuals who made their homes here. All these actual practical things that we have to think about every day. How do I navigate this world embodying the vegan values that I have? That's, to me, is the more interesting thing, rather than just talking in ideas. Do you know what I mean? How does this campaign actually work? What's this language? What's it going to make people think? Do you know what? Talking in real terms, I think it'd be really helpful, especially with our people who don't agree with us.
The very reason that they came up with this idea of practicable and possible, even though that's kind of been abused, by people like Alex O'Connor, for example. But as a general idea, it's not that bad. By the way, I thought you were going to say you've got webs on your feet or something when you start.
Hey, do you know what? I went to school with a boy who had webbed feet. It was called Timothy Small, something like that. Yeah, I think that was him. Timothy Small. He had webbed feet.
What, small feet or small webs?
No, I think he had quite big feet, but they were webbed toes.
Yeah. Well, there's a comedian with one webbed finger, isn't there? The Welsh guy. Yeah, this is a challenging one. Slaughterhouses. Should vegans care only about the animals being slaughtered or the humans working there as well?
That's the one. That's one that comes up a lot, actually, isn't it? Slaughterhouse workers. So I think this goes into, again, it's that entanglement of looking at who the people are who are working in slaughterhouses, where the slaughterhouses are. So I would never justify that action of killing a fellow animal. But what we have to realize is that that person is doing a job, a legitimate job that is created by our society in order to kill those individuals that society has deemed as property and fit for consumption. So that's a whole structural, systemic, industrialized problem. We can't just pick one element of that and go, it's their fault. Do you see what I mean? So it goes to show the complexity of the situation. So I think
I'd agree with everything you said, but when push comes to shove, it's our fellow animals that gets my kind of vote, as it were.
Yeah.
But I do see the humans as victims, but not in the same way. And so there is a complexity and some subtleties to it, but they can be. Well, I don't think all of them can be, because I remember when I was living in Wales, there was a guy who actually loved working in a slaughterhouse. He really liked it, you know, and it was part of his macho image and everything. Now, whether you wanted to put a structural analysis and see him as a victory of patriarchy, you know, you could do that, but really the real victims in that situation are the ones who this person is killing.
Yeah. No, I would totally agree with that as well. Like when I've been to slaughterhouses and I've stood outside and I've seen the trucks coming in, I'm not thinking about the slaughterhouse workers, to be honest. I'm thinking about those individuals, and your heart's breaking for them. And
what can we say about the drivers?
You know, I don't necessarily feel, I understand logically that there's a structural issue there. I don't necessarily feel the empathy for those people in that moment at all. I don't think, oh, poor driver. Not at all. I don't feel like that. I just feel like poor pigs, poor cows, poor chickens.
Well, I don't think, oh, poor slaughterhouse worker. But
no.
I understand.
You understand it logically, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a logic to understanding the theory, and especially, of course, for you and your as a sociologist, you know, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Socialization, structural.
The problem with the macro, the structural, is that a lot of people always see it as letting the perpetrator off.
Yeah.
Like, oh, the family situation, or the, you know, blah, blah, or the culture that they were grown up in and all that. But the real problem is those things are real. You know, they're not real.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
And some people are much more a victim of their culture than, say, we are. I mean, in certain senses, probably everybody in the chat, we're probably fairly rebellious about the culture that we were brought up in. We were all brought up as cultural speciesists, but we've rebelled against that, and we've done it pretty consistently as well. You know, a lot of the problem with the movement is that the consistency of rebellion has got a cost to it, and some people don't like to pay that cost, because that cost is often personal, it's often social, it's often to do with the family, and so for some people it's a really big cost. And so being vegan in a culturally speciesist society has got a real kind of cost to it, and there's multiple layers to that as well. You know, I mean, like almost like you feel as though you're being, you know, psychically beaten up every day just by what you see or what you hear, or
absolutely.
people having conversations about, you know, their food or
Oh, yeah,
their choices,
absolutely.
their attitudes. Yeah.
It's relentless. It's absolutely relentless, isn't it? Every day. And then that's just us having the awareness of it. Imagine what it's like for our fellow animals, living it, experiencing the world, driven and centered and taken over by humans. It's just horrendous. And just kind of comparing this again back to if I hear of if a child's being abused, a woman's being beaten up, or whatever, I don't think, well, that man's had a bad childhood. He's probably been, he's probably the abused becoming the abuser. All of that is true. However, I want to help the child. I want to help the woman, and I want to stop that happening. And I want to make a society that doesn't justify that and doesn't accept that. And I think that's where there's a slight nuance, because I think the majority of society would say we don't really accept and we don't want really to acknowledge domestic abuse. We would all agree this is kind of bad, even though it's still rife and it's still a massive issue. But most people would say they agree that it's wrong and it shouldn't be happening. Whereas I think with a slaughterhouse, the majority of the people are paying for this, are complicit in it, are completely accept that it's just a necessary evil to feed their desires of consuming our fellow animals. And that's where there's a real difference. Going back to what I was saying earlier about having a baseline, there's no baseline of an understanding. The baseline is majority of society agrees that fed animals are commodities and property and there for us to use and kill and breed and murder and imprison, etc.
Yeah, when Gail Aisnitz put out her first book, Slaughterhouse, I remember reading that because it's an ethnography and so it's sociological. And one of the slaughterhouse workers said, well, somebody's got to do the job. So kind of, why not me? And I was thinking that's really interesting, because the start of that is not questionable in the guy's mind. It was a guy. And he said, well, somebody's got to do it. But that bit is not true. No one has to work in a slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
But the entire system is, well, there's a slaughterhouse. Who's gonna be the staff?
Do it, yeah. And I suppose in a way, what I'm thinking now is I don't want to just vilify the slaughterhouse worker, because we can also vilify the person who's paying for that, the society that's creating that as a norm. It's like, should we care? Because going back to Dave's question, do we care about the fellow animals in the slaughterhouse or the slaughterhouse workers? Well, it's like, well, we care more about the individual who's being killed, but also we don't want to just cherry pick the vilification within that system. I think that would be maybe my take on it.
I think Francione said, well, we can be critical of the mercenary, but we can also be critical of the person who's hired the mercenary.
Yeah. Because we've got to dismantle all of that normalization of the violence and the violations and the use, and just vilifying the slaughterhouse worker, the one who's doing it, doesn't acknowledge the bigger picture. That's the risk with that, isn't it? It goes back to that almost welfarism in a way of like, well, you're the one with the knife, or you're the one,
Yeah, because there's kind of like degrees of separation, isn't there? So the one buying it could claim a certain degree of innocence, whereas if you're stood there with a knife in a slaughterhouse, you can't. You can talk about your circumstances, but you can't not know. Whereas somebody going into the local supermarket can kind of either convince themselves they don't know, or they might not actually know. And one of the things that I think is interesting is there is a lot of people who still don't know, really. because we're able to push that kind of knowledge away. We're able to forget it. We're able to put it out of focus, which is why a lot of people dislike vegans, because we bring it back into focus, something that they've carefully swept under the carpet. You know, we lift the carpet and go, oh, what's this then? And they don't like that, because psychically they've dealt with it.
Yeah, and often they project that shame onto us. It's like I've been made to feel so well, tried to. People will literally be so dismissive and angry and upset from a small comment that I might make in support of a fellow animal, and not even being, you know, a pushy vegan or anything, just literally a small comment like, oh, my husband didn't catch many fish the other day, and I'm like, oh, good. The amount of anger and upset that can cause someone, and it's like, hang on a minute, I'm a vegan, I'm advocating for, like, you know, non-violence and justice for all individuals. How come I'm the one that's like being vilified here? How am I the one who's being like shouted at and being, you know, you're getting angry with? It's like,
you've triggered them, haven't you? You've triggered them.
Yeah, but isn't that so funny though, how in their minds you've done something so wrong, and actually if you break it down, it's like, what have I actually done wrong? What about trying to stand up for justice for someone else is so bad?
But I think that's how racism works as well. You know, that there's been quite a few cases recently where there's been quite a lot of violence against women, but the perpetrators have been white. And so there's almost like crickets, media silence. You know, you've got no Tommy Robinson marching, you've got nobody trying to kick their door down or anything. You know, and so again, it's kind of like it's ultimately power relations. You know, and so you don't have to have much of an infraction from the ones without the power for the powerful to think it's a terrible, you know, you've done something really terrible here. You think, no, I haven't. It's just that the power relations skew it that way.
Yeah, because they've got the majority and the power of societal agreement behind them in some way as well. It's that kind of power, isn't it? It's tough going to family get-togethers. Yeah. Definitely.
I was lucky with that because my family left me.
Every cloud.
Yeah. So I'd kind of lived on my own since I was 16, I suppose. 16, 17. You know.
Oh, Roger, making me all sad.
Well, it was a joint decision between me and my mother because, you know, they were divorced, and she got offered a promotion which would take her from Nottingham down to London. I was in Derby, near Nottingham, 10 miles apart, and I had a good job. And my mum said, I've got a chance for the promotion. And I said, well, I don't want to go. She said, okay, well, we'll set you up in a bedsit in Derby and I'll go. So she left me.
Oh, you get me all teary-eyed.
Well, no need to. It's probably the best thing that could have happened, probably.
Right. Well, well, they do say if it's not one thing, it's your mother.
That's true.
But just really quick on that slaughterhouse worker thing. On that slaughterhouse worker thing, of course, there's that entanglement and overlap between domestic violence and slaughterhouse work, isn't there? That often there's a real
correlation,
between the domestic violence from people who work in slaughterhouses. So again, it ties back into the speciesism and the feminism entanglement once more. Just
yeah, that's another point that Gail Smith. I'm not actually quite sure how much research has gone into that and whether it's been confirmed over time. But I know it's a claim that is made that in areas where there is a slaughterhouse, there's more domestic violence.
And mental health difficulties.
It was a big issue during the World Cup, wasn't it?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So So somebody's team gets
and-
knocked out, and you take it out on the wife.
Yeah. That reminds me, when I was a kid, me and my older brother, we were walking back. We'd been to see my dad, and we were walking back, and he always laughs when I tell this story because he just gets quite embarrassed by it. But he'd bought this big bag of sawdust because he used to have this like big board where he had little tiny model soldiers, and he used to paint them like meticulously and have all these battles on this board. And we've been seeing my dad, and he had this big bag of sawdust, and we came like through this crowd of lads, and literally one of the lads just literally punched my brother to the floor, just literally, and he was down, and all his bag of sawdust just went everywhere. And I started running after these lads, right, and just going, I'm gonna get my mates on you, you've hit my brother, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna get my mates, because I knew these two skinhead lads who were my mates, and I was going, I'm gonna get Sparky and Tabsy on you, they're gonna. And my brother's going, shut up, they're going to come back and get me. And he always like used to tell me off for like trying to get these lads. But we found out that these lads were from a football team. They'd just come out of a football match. And their team had won. We were like, their team won. Why did you? It's like punching my butt. We thought, oh, they must have lost. But no, their team had actually won. And it was like, why did you do that to my brother?
Yeah,
anyway,
on a bit of a high, so you can't win either way.
You can't win, no, definitely not.
Yeah, I was beaten up on my first when I went to Elland Road in Leeds for the first time. I was beaten up. I was only a kid. I think I was about 12. I think.
Really? What, on your own?
No, I think it was with a mate, and what we'd done, we'd bought 2 scarves and sewed them together. So it was a real long scarf, so it went round
like a Doctor Who scarf.
And then he's a bit kind of Tom Baker, that kind of.
Tom Baker, yeah, Doctor Who, yeah.
And suddenly I just felt this thing on, and so somebody had run up behind me and just hit me in the back with their knees essentially. And so then they nicked the scarf and were off. But apparently they were rugby fans from Wakefield. So none of it really made that much sense.
Didn't make any sense. Well, they rugby tackled you though to the ground.
Yeah.
Little oiks.
Tykes.
Little tykes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So,
Russians
the same.
It seems. Yeah. So you can't.
Russian, isn't that weird? Weird. You can't believe
Maybe
it.
You can organise it that every game is a draw.
Yeah, it's got the violence. Unbelievable.
Right.
Any
so
excuse, right?
we're going to thank everybody for sticking with us.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It's been so lovely having you there.
Reminiscing towards the end as well.
Scraps. We were both living up north. You see, it was.
Yeah, but
it was rough in our neck of the woods.
When you were running after them, right? You weren't talking posh then, were you?
No, I wasn't. Definitely didn't talk posh. My mum used to try and get me to talk posh, but used to get picked on at school. Then, you talk posh, you. Oh, Mum, stop trying to make me talk posh because I don't want to.
It doesn't take much to get to be an outsider at school, is it?
No.
Right, people. Thanks so much for sticking with us, and we do actually have a few shows lined up. I think every other, aren't they? Every other week.
Yeah. So, we've got a few guests booked in coming up over the next few weeks or so, a couple of months.
What's the next
Some
one?
good ones. Our next one is to be confirmed at the moment. TBC.
Total cop out.
No, it is. That's the date that we haven't quite got sorted yet.
Okay.
From the 17th of August onwards, we've got quite a lot of things planned.
I thought we were going to break the mold there and actually have somebody we could say in 2 weeks' time we're going to have this and you to be confirmed. Yeah, great. Right.
Sorry.
Okay, people.
Oh, look. Thanks, Deb. Tougher childhood, It's quite rough and soft. Rough and tumble.
Well, it was rough up north.
It was rough. It was grim up north.
Yeah, grim, wasn't it? Bloody grim it was.
Grim in Grimsby. Not that I lived in Grimsby, but
we're going to say goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.